Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're dedicating and naming a portion of Interstate 70 through St. Clairsville as the Sergeant Antolak Highway. 68,000 people go by that highway every day. My hope is that when that sign goes up, that people will begin to talk about that. Who is that guy? And some people will know, and maybe they'll share their story. And hopefully some children and grandchildren will ask, and they'll get an education about what happened years ago and the bravery of great people and great men and women in this country.
I'll talk about the Gold Star Family Committee. It's basically two bills that we got passed with a lot of cooperation from everybody. The Gold Star Family license plate for families of fallen warriors. And then we realized after that for folks that are killed in accidents, parachute accident, soldier killed on the range, they're not Gold Star, the family got no recognition. So we now have a license plate in Ohio called military sacrifice. Our family has made sacrifices in World War II. My Aunt Gladys, her husband, she'd been married 6 months, and he was in a merchant marine, and a submarine torpedoed the ship. He was killed. There was 5 Staub's brothers, 4 of them served. My father served as a navigator and patrol bomber on the island of Attu, and spent about 70 years as Sergeant Sylvester Antolak. He's been honored before, but now today he's getting the full recognition that I believe he deserves. We've also got Sergeant Emil DeLoe that's going to be honored in a couple of weeks. But our 2 American heroes from Belmont County, and if I'm not mistaken, Director, I don't know if you know, but of all the signs on Interstate 70 High, I believe these are the only 2 for Medal of Honor recipients.
It is on behalf of all the veterans and members of the Veterans of Foreign Wars in the Department of Ohio. It's an honor to be here representing them.
The men that don the Medal of Honor are just ordinary people that have done an extraordinary thing. To throw caution to the wind and put yourself up for the betterment of your fellow soldiers and your country, you can't plan that. It's just happens, but it happens for a reason, because the person that does it loves who he's with and loves what he's doing and loves his country. And on behalf of a grateful America and the Patriot Guard Riders, please accept our sincere condolences on your tragic loss. But may your pain be tempered with the knowledge that Sergeant Sylvester Antolak, United States Army Medal of Honor recipient, is a true American hero.
We gather in peace. We gather freely. We gather, all of us from different walks of life, even here in Belmont County, as brothers, as friends, to make this honor. We gather in peace because of Sergeant Antolak and the millions of others who have laid down their life for our peace and our security. I think one of the greatest sacrifices that those who lay down their life in combat for our country, in so many cases, they could not come home and have their own family. The privilege that was given to me, in spite of what I went through, my own combat experience, I came home. My little girl had already been born. She was 6 years old when I came home. And after that, I had 2 sons. And I have 6 grandkids. And believe me when I say, when I look at them, I think of people like Sergeant Antolak, who could not be born. So enjoy your day of peace, and thank God for people like him. God bless.
Sylvester, to his brothers and sisters who are sadly deceased, was known as Becky. A loving brother who worked the family farm, who loved to hunt and fish. A hero. We, as his remaining family, are fortunate to have pictures, military documents, newspaper articles, and most importantly, cards and letters sent by Sylvester to family members as a way for us to connect with an uncle that we did not have the privilege to know. For me, it was deeply moving when I realized I held in my hand a letter written by Sylvester just a short time before his death. Sylvester's letters told of his first encounter with the Jerrys and his ponderings of when their next battle would take place. He also expressed thoughts of the men in his unit. Over the years, Sylvester has been honored in many different ways, and he has always had a presence in our lives. My parents had a wall in their family room that had a banner that read, "The Greatest Generation," and Sylvester's picture, his medals, and his citation took center stage. So Sylvester, we thank you for your selfless and heroic actions, your unrelenting devotion to duty, and for the freedoms that you helped secure for our nation.
My name is Robert Sylvester Antolak. Yes, I'm named after the man that we're here to honor today. My first remembrance of the name was in first grade, trying to say it and spell it. It was kind of hard. Like the name that they gave Becky. I had to spell it, and then when I did, they always said, "Why are you named after Sylvester the cat cartoon?" I said, "No, I'm named after my uncle. He did something very special in World War II. I actually had an opportunity, our family, to go to Washington, D.C. There's the Pentagon. As we entered, I showed him my name, and the Army representative recognized Sylvester Antolak. He said, "Are you related to Sergeant Sylvester Antolak?" He pulled a book off his desk, the Medal of Honor book. I said, "Yes, he's my uncle." He said, "You have to see the Hall of Honor." The Army representatives there all looked at that as kind of a chapel, like this was the best of the best. President Bush went to Antioch. He went to the military cemetery where our uncle is buried, and he spoke of him.
One such soldier was Sergeant Sylvester Antolak, an Ohio farm boy, the youngest son of Polish immigrants. On a drizzly morning some 45 years ago this week, he led Staff Sergeant Audie Murphy and others in a bold charge through the rain and the ruin near Chistern. One man against a machine gun nest that blocked the road to Rome. And 3 times he was cut down by fire. 3 times he got back up, tucking his gun under his shattered arm. And by the time he disabled the gunners, 10 enemy soldiers surrendered to this man whom their bullets could not stop. Sergeant Antolak fell near Chistern that same day. He rests here beneath the pines of Natuno with nearly 8,000 soldiers. His grave, one of 2, marked with our Congressional Medal of Honor.
Life on the farm was tough. He lived through the Depression. I'm sure that had a lot to do with what he did in the military. It was you had to get your work done, you worked from day to night, all the daylight. You didn't have much time to fish and hunt, but you loved it. So coon hunting became their favorite thing. There's a picture of my dad and my uncle together with 3 coon dogs. You could coon hunt at night. As long as you got to bed and got up in the morning, you had work to do. I need to recognize my mother here today. She's 94 years old. She also was part of World War II. She was one of the Rosie Riveters. She went to Detroit, worked in the factory, became an airplane inspector, inspected airplane parts, something to do with the windshield. She was the best airplane inspector in the planet. If you don't believe me, ask her. You see, my dad was also a World War II veteran. Bronze Star, 2 Purple Hearts. I'm not even sure he knew his brother was dead until he came home from the war in August of 1945 from the South Pacific. My father named me after his brother. He didn't name me after himself. I'm the oldest boy in the family. He named me after his brother. And now that I'm an older adult, I realize how important that is. And I must say that the name may live on. My grandson is named Sylvester also. So I can't wait to tell him the stories about his famous uncle. Thank you.
For my post commander, I want to thank his family for having us over, and it was an honor to be on the honor guard for this. And it just lets you know we veterans also respect that our fellow veterans, the sacrifices they make also out there. We're very proud to have a lot of recipients in this area.
Sergeant Sylvester Antolak was killed in action in World War II on May 24th, 1944 during the Anzio beachhead assault.
May 23rd, 1944, the Anzio breakout begins. The days of the Sitzkrieg at Anzio are at an end, and the days of the beachhead itself nearly so.
I am Marion Ellis, Private First Class Rifleman, 2nd Platoon, Company B, 15th Infantry, in which capacity I was present at and an eyewitness of the following action. On the 24th day of May 1944, at about 1300 hours, during the offensive which smashed the German lines around the Anzio beachhead, Company B, 15th Infantry, was moving forward over flat, coverless, exposed ground.
Our job was to cut the railroad near Cisterna di Littoria, Italy, and take the high ground on its far side.
We reached the railroad without encountering any enemy fire, and the 1st Platoon crossed over the embankment. Just as the scouts of the 2nd Platoon were moving up toward the tracks, German machine gun, machine pistol, and rifle fire from a position on the railroad tore into us. We hit the ground trying desperately hard to find some sort of cover on that flat ground. The Hun machine gun was about 200 yards away. With our lead patrol out in front, cut off, and in danger of being isolated and destroyed, the situation looked very bleak. Sergeant Sylvester Antolak, a squad leader in my platoon, decided that the only thing to do was to assault and smash the German strong point immediately. It was practically a suicide mission, as the enemy had ideal fields of fire. Ordering his squad to follow, Sergeant Antolak dashed forward toward the enemy machine gun in swift, short rushes. The men followed about 30 yards behind him. Most of the enemy fire was concentrated on Sergeant Antolak because he was the spark plug of the assault. After rushing forward a few dozen yards, machine gun fire hit him, spun him around, and sent him sprawling on the ground. His shoulder bleeding, he jumped to his feet and continued his headlong rush. Again, he was hit and knocked off his feet, but nothing would stop him. In a few seconds, Sergeant Antolak was up again, covered with grime and blood, and rushing straight as an arrow toward the machine gun. The Germans were firing their automatic weapons as fast as they could, desperately trying to knock out Sergeant Antolak. He had narrowed the distance from 200 yards to 50 yards when they got him a third time. He lurched to his feet, continued his one-man rush, and I saw that his right arm had been mutilated and was hanging useless at his side. Nothing could stop the sergeant. He jammed his Thompson submachine gun into his left armpit and kept on rushing forward. 15 yards from the Kraut emplacement, Sergeant Antolak opened fire. Shooting down into the machine gun position, he killed the gunner and assistant gunner with a long burst of fire. Before the rest of the men reached him, 10 German support riflemen and machine pistol men surrendered. Almost immediately, a group of 8 German riflemen opened fire from a position about 100 yards to our right. We urged Sergeant Antolak to stay in the captured machine gun emplacement. His shoulder was gashed open, his shirt was blood-soaked, and he was reeling with pain. But he was determined to keep on going until the enemy was destroyed. Again, Sergeant Antolak led us in the attack. He charged forward, straight into the concentrated fire of the German riflemen. With the rest of us following several yards behind him, he made 60 yards and then was hit for the 4th time, this time mortally. By sheer willpower, he managed to stagger forward another 10 yards, then collapsed. We rushed on, assaulted the German position, and overran it, taking the 8 Kraut prisoners, and when we returned to evacuate Sergeant Antolak, he was dead. Sergeant Antolak's intrepidity and fighting spirit had enabled the squad to kill or capture 20 Germans, wipe out the last enemy pockets in the area, and prevent the 1st platoon from being cut off. If it hadn't been for what he did, we might have hesitated and as a result been practically cut to pieces. I'm sure that what Private Ellis witnessed that day and was a part of had a direct influence on him throughout the rest of his military life. Private Ellis went on to fight bravely that day and in several other battles throughout Europe. Private Ellis, now Corporal Ellis, was honorably discharged from the service at the end of the war in 1945. Mr. Ellis died in a VA hospital in Georgia at the age of 86. There was also another eyewitness that day, a very young sergeant at that time, who witnessed Sergeant Antolak's bravery and valor that day. This young sergeant was in that 1st platoon that had crossed over the railroad embankment and was isolated and in danger of being cut off and destroyed if it had not been for Sergeant Antolak's mission to destroy the enemy's machine gun nest that was firing down upon them. What this young sergeant saw that day definitely had a profound effect on him throughout the rest of his military life as he continued to distinguish himself bravely in battle. This young sergeant went on to become a lieutenant in the Army and also the most decorated combat soldier of World War II. The man I'm talking about is Audie Murphy. Audie Murphy never forgot that day. In his best-selling autobiography titled To Hell and Back, he mentions Sergeant Sylvester Antolak's heroic efforts that day in May. So, as this sign is erected tomorrow along Interstate 70 near Exit 216, the hometown of St. Clairsville hometown of Sergeant Sylvester Antolak, our hope is that as Marion Ellis and Audie Murphy were influenced by Sergeant Antolak's bravery, that those who drive by and see the name and the Medal of Honor recipient's name and hopefully take the time to discover who he was and what this brave man did for his country. And maybe in some small way, his influence will influence their lives for the better as he has influenced ours. The Highway Memorial sign to honor Sylvester Antolak was the idea of 2 men, Mr. Stan Sobel and Mr. Floyd Simpson. These 2 men pitched their idea to Richard Staubs, who in turn proposed it to our Ohio House Representative Jack Serra, who in turn drafted House Bill 584 and followed through to passage by the Ohio legislature. And finally, there's only one other person we need to recognize and thank. But let me rephrase that. There's one other very courageous, brave hero that we need to thank. And that's our Uncle Sylvester. Thank you. Dziękuję.
'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did thy grace appear, the hour I first believed.
And I just cannot walk away without two thoughts that come to mind. One, that in honoring a Medal of Honor winner, we honor each and every person who has served. And the second, as I look out here, I see Herman and so many of my peers. And I talked about my glasses. I don't hear near as well. A little bit of gray hair on top, and I am not nearly as flexible. And I see that in many of my comrades. And I can't help but think that a ceremony of this nature brings back to us a little bit of glint in the eye and a livelier step, and perhaps a little straighter as we stand and salute. So, in thanking Sergeant Sylvester Antolak and his family, I salute all my fellow veterans and thank everyone who has come here today. Thank you, and with the theme, please go in peace.